Hello, good evening, and thank you for making time for News at 10. I'm Stephen NT. Let's begin the bulletin with a look at the major news highlights of the day. The Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation is pushing for an increase in research fund to 1% of GDP. The budgetary allocation to research is currently 0.02% of GDP. The Sector Minister, Professor Frimpong Boateng, insists an increase would enable the ministry scale up its science and research into some communicable diseases in the country. The Chinese ambassador to Ghana, Sung Bao-hong, says Chinese investors are ready to invest in wind and clean coal energy in Ghana after recent engagements during an official visit by Vice President Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. According to the ambassador, China is confident trade volumes between the two countries will rise above the $6.6 billion figure recorded in 2015 due to the strengthening of bilateral relations. And the Atebubu Kwame Danso Road in the Sene West district of the Bono Ahafo region is deplorable. The situation has led to dwindling commercial activities, resulting in low economic growth in the district. And management of the Tamale Teaching Hospital have refuted claims that the hospital has reversed to cash and carry. The hospital again refuted claims it is involved in NHIS financial malfeasance as alleged by a group calling itself Coalition for Change in Government Institutions, describing them as unfounded and malicious. And remember, we're live on 3news.com. We're also streaming on our Facebook page, and you can hear us on 3news.com. Let's start with some foreign news. French President Emmanuel Macron has thrown his weight behind a Sahel force to fight jihadists. Faced with a growing number of jihadist attacks in central Mali, which have also hit neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, the G5 Sahel nations moved to set up a regional force to tackle the threat. Let's quickly get onto the telephone lines and speak with Professor Vladimir Ntwi Danso, the Director of Academic Affairs at the Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College. He's also an international relations expert. Good evening, Prof. We're grateful for your time. So this
good evening, and
force,
good evening to your viewers.
Thank you. This force, new force to tackle terrorism in the Sahel region, will you say it is long overdue, or perhaps it is one of the usual excuses to use a one-pronged approach to tackle something that needs multiple approaches?
Well, I wouldn't say it's long overdue. It is precisely because West Africa has been inactive. The AU had gotten a certain architecture where the regional bodies should have their own standing forces that would douse the fires if they arose. But since 2010, when we thought the West Africa Standby Force could be in place, it didn't come on. 2015 didn't come on. And then we had the Malian, or what we call the Arc of Terror, very active after the Libyan problems. And so the French came in the Malian case. And still, the issue is that the place is clearly very active with terrorism. And the French knew that from there, Southern Europe and then France would be the target. So I think it's a move in the right direction at the right time.
Right.
They've got a base in Agadez, but they thought that bringing in ready West African countries whom they can support, instead of waiting for the whole of ECOWAS to do it, is the proper way. And I think it's a proper thing they've done at this time.
But Prof, Chad, which is arguably the strongest, the most potent military in the region, is complaining of pressures for forces for terrorism, including its operation in Nigeria. How else do you think ECOWAS, what role actually do you think ECOWAS and the African Union should be playing to complement the Sahel region and the force?
I think this is a wake-up call. The Americans had what we call the Pan-Sahel Initiative. It hasn't worked to perfection. They had a quota, they had ACRI, but the Pan-Sahel area is a troublesome area from time immemorial. Now that the French have picked up these 5 countries and are supporting them, I think the West African sub-region, ECOWAS specifically, should now be able to complement, should now be able to set up the West African Standby Force as a complementary kind of force for what the French are doing. I believe this is a time that they should use all the resources available because they were going in for the real one. Now somebody has taken almost 2/3 or 3/4 of the problem. So why wouldn't West Africa support it with the establishment of their own standby force?
And let me ask you, I know that we're talking a lot about this threat, but the threat of terrorist groups across the Sahel region, to what extent does it also threaten the entire West Africa sub-region?
It does threaten the entire West Africa sub-region because if you look at the arc from Mauritania all the way to Chad, Niger, Chad, and then linking up with Al-Shabaab, which means that belt will be dealing in gun running, sale of small arms and light weapons. That arc will be a threat to both people in the south and people in the north. And also, terrorism is linked intrinsically with drugs. And you can imagine what it does for those of us in the south and those up there. And it's a trading route. And so if you don't stop this menace, there is not a single one of the West African countries, East African countries, that will be in peace. And so it is proper that we stop terrorism in that arc. And that is why it is very important what the French is doing.
And I know whilst we talk about these threats, we have seen there is evidence to show that even in fighting Al-Qaeda, military interventions alone have not helped. So if we talk about fighting Al-Shabaab, fighting Boko Haram, and fighting other terrorist groups within the Sahel region by creating a force, is that the most effective way to tackle these threats?
It is only one of the many, and it's the most effective in all. Forward presence in any military operation, one of the things that we always need. If the terrorists know that there is a force they have to confront first before organizing their terrorist activities, they know they have to vary their tactics. So the presence of a rapid deployment force is very important. Meanwhile, fighting terrorism, everybody's concerned. Intelligence gathering is the most important in all these. Now, if you don't have intelligence gathering, if you don't have your population awareness of terrorism, you have gone nowhere. So yes, whilst we need that forward presence, while we need that ready army and that kind of thing, intelligence is important, awareness creation is important, and changing the atmosphere where the terrorists can operate is also very important.
Right. Prof, we're grateful for your time. Professor Vladimir Ntwi-Danso is with the Staff College of the Ghana Armed Forces and International Relations Expert. Let's move away from that. President Akufo-Addo says rapid economic development anticipated from the NPP's government's policies will translate into more satisfactory pension arrangements for the elderly. He said the Finance Ministry was already working to improve the administration of pensions in the country. Speaking at this year's Senior Citizens Day on Saturday, the President noted the measures will help set up pension arrangements for farmers.
Measures are being put in place to address the needs of key demographic segments of our society, specifically to set up pension arrangements for farmers in our major cash crop agricultural sectors like cocoa, coffee, shea nuts, palm oil, pineapple, and cashew nuts.
Right, let's get on to Skype and speak with Philip Abayori. He is the president of the Ghana Agricultural Chamber of Commerce. He's joining us now. Mr. Abayori, good evening and thank you. We're grateful that you could join. Now, according to the president, there are moves to set up what he calls pension arrangements for farmers in major cash crop agricultural sectors like cocoa, coffee, shea nut, and all of that. Is this good or bad?
Yeah, it is very, very good and important. You know, these sectors are a major contributor to our economy. And you have large segments of the farmers involved, and definitely having a good pension will at least help them at the long end to also increase, their financial capabilities in one way and the other. You know, some of the farmers are aging, and after they have toiled for this while, they definitely need some secure pension scheme to at least assist them to be able to live their lives after the point that they could not really engage in this activity. So I think we need to be happy that this is going to happen to support our poor farmers who have consistently dedicated themselves to produce enough cash crops to support the economy.
Right. Obviously, this is only a promise coming from the president. But as a chamber, I also know that you have been encouraging farmers to voluntarily register or set aside some of their proceeds for their future when they can no longer work. How do we draw the line between your chamber encouraging them to still save and also ensuring that government will do what is due them by allocating some pension arrangements for them?
I think it's all complementary because we in the private sector definitely, as a chamber, we are encouraging our members, to work towards ensuring that their livelihood will not be threatened. And part of what the president has promised is to have a safety net to ensure that at the end of the day, they will be able to depend on some pensions when at the particular time that they are not strong enough to be able to work. So I think we're going to work to ensure that we support this initiative to make it a reality.
So let's move away from that. I know that the fall army worm issue has been a big headache for farmers and government ministries and institutions. So far, what would you say, let me put it this way, how would you rate the progress that have been made by government over the fight against these army worms?
You know, this armyworm infestation, for instance, this year has become a phenomenon because some time ago, we used to have this attack or infestation coming in 2-3 regions. By this time, it has affected almost 10 regions of the country. So the phenomenon is so great, and I think the ministry had some challenges of being able to respond. So all we are saying is that with this experience, we need to have emergency preparedness. As we are budgeting to plant, we should also ensure that year by year we budget to be able to have these particular antidotes, especially to store enough chemicals for unforeseen circumstances of this nature, so that we should not be taken by surprise. Because sometimes you plan, and if you don't make these contingencies, these particular kind of attacks could reduce yields and also destroy a lot of farmers' income, and that is not good for our economy. So I think this is an eye-opener to us as Ghanaians and also to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture to ensure that... I
actually wanted to hear from you what you make of the measures that have been put in place by government so far to deal with the crisis. There was a setting up of a committee, emergency committee. A couple of meetings have been held already. An allocation of some amount of money have been set aside to deal with the problem, and yet the spread is still ongoing.
You see, some of these things, this is a disaster, and a disaster do not have time for you to meet and prepare. And that is why I say emergency preparedness and alertness before time is very important. We should bear in mind that as we are engaged in agriculture, we will definitely face these epidemics. So for this particular phenomenon of attack this year, for instance, I've told you that the magnitude is so enormous that nobody expected that 10 regions at the same time will have an infestation of an armyworm infestation. So one the government or the ministry may have not prepared and even said that this will happen. So for that reason, they may be slow to contain the situation is taking a longer period.
Right.
So then I'm saying and advising that for what we have seen, we should not allow this to happen again. We should ensure that at each time we are budgeting for anything to support production, we should bear in mind that we have some kind of funds for emergencies, so that in one way and the other, we store a lot of chemicals, bearing in mind that should in case, we shouldn't wait for the infestation to start for us to rally around to try, because an emergency is an emergency, so that we wouldn't find ourselves wanting and have some difficulty. Yeah.
Right, Mr. Abayori, we're grateful. Thank you very much. Philip Abayori is the president of the Ghana Agricultural Chamber of Commerce. I'm Stephen Enti. You can hear me also live on 3FM 92.7 and on the TuneIn app on your mobile phone. We're streaming live on our Facebook page and on 3news.com. Welcome back. Now, Ghana has maintained its ranking on the Tier 2 watch list in the 2017 Trafficking in Persons report of the U.S. State Department. Ghana has been on Tier 2 watch list for 2 consecutive years. The law established in the Trafficking in Human report indicates that a country ranked on Tier 2 for 2 consecutive years must be downgraded to Tier 3 in the 3rd year, unless it shows sufficient progress to warrant a Tier 2 or Tier 1 ranking. The narrow escape means Ghana needs to take the necessary actions in the next 10 months to improve on its rankings. Let's quickly go on to Skype. I've been joined on Skype by James Kofi Annan, who is the president of the Challenging Heights Ghana. James, nice to speak to you again. I know that you've raised concerns at what you say is a seeming turf war between the child labor unit of the ministry and that of the Gender and Social Protection Ministry. How bad is this affecting the fight against human trafficking?
Well, thank you very much. The turf war that has happened between the 2 ministries has left the country unable to coordinate the activities of human trafficking. So for instance, there have been cases where the Ministry of Employment, through the Child Labor Unit, has argued that a certain aspect of the activities that affect children are under their purview, and therefore the Human Trafficking Unit should not go there. It has been vice versa in some other cases. So you have a certain situation where there will be an issue and none of the ministries would attend to it because each one feels that the other is going to attend to it. So it has affected us so much, and that is why we are calling for a Ghana Human Trafficking Commission.
So let me get back to this coordination thing you speak about. Over the weekend, I had a private engagement. Some senior officials of the CID, the Anti-Human Trafficking Unit of the CID. This is a personal engagement, so I wouldn't want to put that on record. But one key thing I gathered from that interaction was that the various stakeholders involved in the fight against human trafficking are not working with each other. They are not talking to each other. For example, the police service could go on to arrest all those who are culprits in conformity with the law. But then after they have arrested these people and after they've rescued the children, there are no shelters for them. So it looks like one stakeholder is doing its work, another stakeholder is not doing its work. So the lack of coordination, from where you stand, how best can this be dealt with?
Well, I would want to reiterate our call for the Ghana Human Trafficking Commission that should be under the presidency, because that is the solution for the coordination mechanism for the fight trafficking. And I agree with you. Whoever was the government official who had that private conversation with you, that there have been so many times that the human trafficking unit of the Ghana Police Service has rescued some victims, and they are supposed to be taking the victims to court to prosecute offenders. But there's another person who is supposed to shelter them and provide food and provide rehabilitation. But then who is supposed to do that? That leaves the question to no one. Because if it is a child, the court has not determined the case that, yes, this is a human trafficking case. And therefore, it can be a child labor case or it can be a human trafficking case. So no one is owning up to take responsibility. And that is why you need a central mechanism. Under normal circumstance, it should be the human trafficking unit who must provide the coordination mechanism.
But James, you also want government.
It's also not having the funding.
James, you also want government to invest at least 20 million cedis each year towards addressing the issue of human trafficking. You obviously have just told us that there is a need for a commission to be formed to do the coordination. Can government do this? Provide 20 million cedis every year, form a commission, which of course will also draw some cost from government purse. Can government achieve this with all the numerous pressures at its door?
Yes, government is well able and is capable of doing that. Now, all over the country, all over the world, every country is doing something and investing a lot of money. I mean, the U.S. government is investing nearly $1 billion into addressing this issue. So government can do that. But you know what? The failure to invest that much amount would mean that we will lose about $600 million. So we would have to prioritize. What do we want to do? Do we need this $600 million to come into our economy by way of investing 20 million, or we don't need it? I mean, this is a question that we have to answer. And when we are saying that government should invest 20 million, it doesn't mean that when you invest the 20 million is going to go into something that's just setting up the commission. No, the 20 million is the setup of the commission, including all activities that the police is doing, the human trafficking secretariat is doing, the child labor unit is doing, all the district assemblies, what they are doing towards addressing of child labor and child trafficking. That is what the 20 million cedis is going to go into. So, and for me, it is a peanut.
It's peanut. James, Ms. Annan, you obviously would not think that the Ministry of Gender, actually, the ministry had said that this year alone it committed about 5 million cedis to support the fight against human trafficking. Obviously, you think this is not enough, right?
Did they tell you that it's 5 million? I have heard 1.5 million. And even if it is 5 million, that is too small. But I heard the minister herself commenting that government has invested 1.5 million. Of course, 1.5 million is something over and above what has been invested in the past. But that is an insult to the fight against human trafficking. If I, Challenging Heights, my organization, is investing at least $1 million a year in the fight against human trafficking in Ghana, and the whole government machinery is investing 1.5 million Ghana cedis, and if you convert my $1 million, you are talking about nearly 5 million cedis into the fight against human trafficking.
Right.
You are talking, that's an insult. It's
right, Ms. Annan, we're grateful for your time. James Kofi Annan is the from Challenging Heights, Executive Director of Challenging Heights. Thank you very much. Let's move away from the child trafficking issues. The Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation is pushing for an increase in research fund to 1% of GDP. The Sector Minister, Professor Frimpong Boateng, who made this known, insists an increase would enable the ministry scale up its science and research into some communicable diseases in the country. Budgetary allocation to research is currently 0.02% of GDP.
Professor Frimpong Boateng was speaking at a workshop of African scientists in Accra, geared towards linking quality research to academia to foster business growth. The 175 scientists and experts from across the globe at the 3-day workshop would also review scientific progress in communicable diseases and the need for increased funding for research on the continent. Director of Alliance for Accelerating Excellence in Science in Africa, AISA, Dr. Thomas Kariuki, is confident the workshop would develop better strategies for science.
Everything from infectious diseases, malaria, TB, HIV, and neglected tropical diseases, immunity and infection, host pathogen interactions, molecular mechanisms of disease, non-communicable diseases, including mental health, transdisciplinary approaches.
The Minister of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Frimpong Boateng, expressed concern over inadequate funds for research in Ghana. For 10 years, government support to research has been 0.02%.
We are able to start with 1% of GDP. I think we can get somewhere. Apart from that, we are setting up an STI fund, Science, Technology and Innovation Fund. So we are setting up the groundwork, the framework for this thing to take off. And I'm going to take the president by his word. He is serious, and he knows I'm also serious.
Deputy Minister of Health, Kingsley Abuaji-Jedu, underscored the importance of science in developing vaccines.
Ghanaian research institutions have also led several of the key malaria vaccine trials, including the one licensed vaccine, RTSS. Ghana is also one of the countries selected for the pilot deployment of the RTSS vaccine.
And that's how we draw the curtains for News at 10. Thank you for making time with us. And then for those who tuned in to 3FM 92.7, thank you for leaving your dial there. On behalf of the crew, good night. There is more news at 3news.com.